heartland of America and coast to coast, this is EM Student with Professor Dan Scott.
Crisis is a great revealer. Simon Sinek. Hello and welcome to EM Student. I'm Dan Scott. Today we are going to talk about a disaster and emergency management program with a well-known professor. David Etkin is a professor of disaster and emergency management at York University in Canada. Previously, he worked for Environment Canada for a long period of time during his career. He's been a weather forecaster. He is very well versed in climatology. He has written numerous books, which one we will talk about today. So I'd like to welcome David Etkin to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure.
So I want to talk. So you are a professor for disaster and emergency management at York University in Ontario, Canada, correct?
That's right, yes.
And so York is the first university in Canada to offer both a bachelor's and a master's in this field.
That's right, and hopefully in the next year or two a PhD as well. We're hoping.
Really, that's new information to me. That's any institution that goes through the steps to offer this program and actually build upon their programs is definitely an institution we need to show and popularize and publicize out to the industry. So what is your thoughts on, because I mean, you've had this conversation before. For those who don't know, David and I both sit on the ethics committee trying to build a code of ethics for the profession of emergency management and how it is both practiced and taught. So as one of the issues that I see in the field is that we don't publicize it enough. We don't popularize it. We don't advertise the field. And as we try and grow that, we need individuals that are both educated and experienced. In your experience, how do we do that? How do we better go after those that we want to be the next generation of emergency managers?
Well, that's a great question, because actually many of the students who come into our programs tell us they just stumbled across it in the web and they've never even heard of emergency management before. So, and I think as a profession, it's less known in Canada than it is in the US, where FEMA is like a pretty well-known institution. I guess just more outreach to the public by emergency managers, just to let them know that we exist. I think just more PR and publicity.
So one of the areas that I struggle with is that in our, like FEMA, for instance, you mentioned FEMA. They are not able, because they are a government organization, they are not able to advertise emergency management, not able to advertise many of their services. They are not able to go out and reach those that we are looking for, not just to be a practitioner, but maybe those who actually need and could be seeking their services. So how do we as a practitioner, how do we as those who are actually teaching it, promote it?
As teachers, it's hard. I think for governmental institutions, they are constrained, of course, the way you say. It's not like they're selling a powder to clean your sink. But we still all engage in outreach. So like educational programs, that's part of what FEMA or Public Safety Canada or state or provincial or municipal organizations do. They do outreach. So sort of the PR could be a side effect of that, saying, this is what you should be doing. It's a public education program, and hey, now you know we exist.
And that's one of the things that I promote and one of the reasons why I'm doing EM Student is to develop and invest in people and promote professional and personal development. And one of the ways we're doing that is bringing individuals like yourself on the show to advertise and talk about their programs. So let's talk about your program specifically. What does your programs offer? What are they? So as far as you got a bachelor's and a master's, what can a student expect to learn entering your program?
We have a certificate program as well, where people could come in and just in 1 year go through a bunch of EM courses and get a certificate. They don't have to do the full bachelor's degree. So we have a general 3 years degree and a 4 year honors degree, and could be specialized, or can be like your secondary area of specialization, or you could go to the master's. It could be full-time, part-time. And I mean, like most programs, the undergraduate one is a mixture of education and training to try and get people to that place where they can enter the profession and sort of just slip into a role. Of course, there's still a huge learning curve no matter what you're doing. Emergency managers do so many different kinds of things that you can't really train or educate somebody for one very specific role, because then they'd be far too narrow. In the master's program, we emphasize theory a lot more, so the underlying questions of why we do what we do, why things are happening, and what are the different ways of addressing it from different theoretical models, and try and link that theory to practice.
And that's one of the things that I'm trying to, and we've had conversations multiple times over the last few years, as far as how do we bridge that gap between those who learn specifically on the job, and then those who learn in the classroom. How we transition those who learn in the classroom to the job, and bridging the gap between the practitioner and the educator. And I think a big proponent of that is understanding that even with emergency management, just like any other law enforcement, fire, EMS, you go through a training, you get certified, you get licensed to do stuff, you get into the field, and then you are retrained on how to do things on the job. So going through the degree and learning all the fundamentals, and learning all the basics of how to be an emergency manager and what's important, and all the different aspects that go through with emergency management, which is one of the reasons why I love it so much. Is there's so much that you can go through, and there's so many different aspects of it, but you still have to learn it when you're doing it in real life. And I mean, with coronavirus, and it just seems like, because it's so large and it's impacted the world on such a large level, we have to keep going back to coronavirus, even though there's so many of us that have done this for so long. We've never encountered something like this, because it's been, the second time something at this level has happened in 100 years. So it's definitely an important differentiation, but it's an important aspect to have both education and experience in this field.
Oh, absolutely. I think new graduates have to go into the field with a sense of humility, because they have a lot to learn. But at the same time, academics have a lot to offer practitioners. So if you're just embedded in the practice of the field and you haven't been exposed to the theory, then you're not going to be as effective an emergency manager because of that. I think that gap is diminishing over time, just because in Canada and the US, we're producing so many graduates from universities. The people moving into the field now have that general background, and they haven't sort of come up by the seat of their pants as a second career, first responder, for example. But we need that blending of theory and practice. Academics need practitioners, and practitioners need academics. And it's a problem that there's not more overlap. And I'll just make one comment. Probably the most and a lot of the best research in disaster studies has come out of the United States. Like, there's just the volume of publications from first-class people who are sociologists or anthropologists, or now even emergency managers, PhD emergency managers. It's overwhelming, and it certainly dominates the globe in terms of that field. And yet we're in a situation where I would say, in terms of managing COVID in the States, all the basic precepts of good emergency management are being violated.
Yeah.
And I don't need to go into them. You know what they are too. There's a lot of talk about them, and there's just this great irony. I've often heard people say disasters are a political process, and they certainly are. And I think this demonstrates it more clearly than ever.
And I agree with that. When we make a disaster political, we ultimately hurt those that we're supposed to be representing. And
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons behind my passion for educating and building people up to actually do the profession properly, to be educated and get experience, because you are representing a whole lot of people that depend on you and your decisions in how the response to a crisis or a disaster would potentially not just save their lives, but their livelihood, on how they continue to work every day. And these are things that, as myself right now, as a practitioner transitioning into the academic realm, it's one of those things that you don't see a lot of. And even when I do talk to practitioners, like, why don't you go teach a class? Well, I don't want to teach a class. But you could bring so much to the classroom because of your so much experience that you have,
Yeah.
and it would benefit the next generation of those. But we also have to think about this: is that we want to benefit, and we want to educate, and we want to develop the next generation. But we're the generation that are doing it now. We're the ones here doing it right now, and we need to develop ourselves just as well. So whether or not we're going back for a degree, we should still want to educate ourselves and build ourselves up professionally to be the best at what we're doing. So we need to ultimately, and I don't want to get political because I'm not a real politically outspoken person, but ultimately I don't agree with politicizing a disaster or a crisis. But I also think that when we put the health of a party over the health of the citizens, we do just disjustice to everybody. So that's my 2 cents on that. But as far as right now, let's talk about coronavirus. In your program, one of the things that jumps out to me the most are two of the aspects that you promote. One of them is business continuity, and the other is crisis communication. So right now, as we can see, those are two of the things that people are seeking the most. I mean, people are putting out job seeking, saying we need someone to come in for a short term to help us build our business continuity planning, or just to help us keep on with continuity of operations. So if someone wanted to just come in and take a few courses, what would you recommend?
Well, we have courses in those topics, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. In business continuity, anyway. Crisis communication, it's just an undergraduate course. I would say, hey, go to our website, register for a certificate program. All you need is a high school degree for that, and take a couple courses, see how you like it. Of course, you'll get hit with the prerequisite structure, so you may have to take more than one or two. But you know what? You don't need to take courses in university to learn. I took physics and math in university, and I was a climatologist and a meteorologist. Like, I don't think I didn't have any courses in social sciences. And yes, that's all I work in now. And so I learned by going to conferences. I learned by talking to people who were sociologists or social scientists. I learned by reading books and reading papers. And so I've been doing that for the past 20 years, and that's how I've educated myself in this field. And it's great to take courses, but there is a wealth of material out there available to anybody who cares to look for it.
Yeah, and I absolutely 100% agree. And on another level of that too is seeking out a mentor, seeking out someone who does it and has done it for a long time, that can help you and guide you through a process and help you get there so much quicker than that individual even got there, by giving you learning from their experiences instead of having to create your own, especially when it comes to failure. Learn from someone else's failure versus your own.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll make one comment. There's a Fisher, you know that Fisher who wrote that book about beliefs of disasters, sort of false beliefs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Henry Fisher. He wrote a really interesting book. I think it was based upon his PhD dissertation. But anyway, it was about disaster mythologies and all the beliefs that people have about disasters that are not true. So we did a really interesting survey looking at professional emergency managers and the degree to which they have a belief in these disaster myths, which have been debunked. And what he found was that a vast majority of professional managers, emergency managers, believed in many of these disaster myths. And the number of years they were operational did not change that. The number of emergencies they responded to did not change that. The number of exercises they went on did not change that in a significant way. The one factor that really changed it was education. and the degree to which they had, taken courses or engaged in some form of learning about all the theory that's been written by, Cortelli or the hordes of other disaster researchers who are publishing. So I just emphasizing it's so important for practitioners to be exposed to theory, because there's actually, in my view, nothing more practical than a good theory. But we have to be grounded too. We have to be grounded in the practice. And so these links between, sort of the academics and practitioners, we just need to strengthen them.
And I agree with that. I think ultimately we need to, as I frame it, we need to build that bridge, but we also need to aid the practitioner in helping to apply all their experience and their knowledge to the theory in which they're being developed.
Yes.
So that's that's just my 2 cents, as far as, but I have this conversation, and I actually go out of my way to schedule conversations just about how do we bridge that gap between the academic and the practitioner, because ultimately it's going to benefit not only us now, but it'll benefit those who are going to be coming into the field later, or as they, and more than that, I want to make those individuals understand why they should want. People grow up thinking, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a cop, I want to be a firefighter. I would love to hear a child, I want to be an emergency manager when I grow up.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, I've never heard that either. There's only one in all my time, in all my courses, I've come across one person who said that they knew they wanted to be an emergency manager, and that's what they went to school for. And in the classroom, I was, it was in a professional, it was in my executive academy, and at FEMA, and it blew me away. But ultimately, there are those who do it, and I want to increase that number. So as we transition, I want to transition into. So you have over 80 publications. You've written 2 textbooks, and one of them is the Ethical Emergency Manager: Issues, Morality, and Dilemmas. So let's talk about that. Like I mentioned, I alluded to a little earlier, is that me and you sit on the ethics committee, developing a code of ethics for the profession and the education, teaching it. So what made you decide to write this book?
Well, I've been teaching a course on that topic for a few years now. We have one in the undergraduate program and one in the graduate program. I was teaching the grad course, and there was just a lack of resources to teach it. I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there on ethics, like a ton of stuff, both academic books and on the web available, YouTube videos, like you name it. But there was very, very little that was oriented towards emergency managers. So after doing this for a few years, I'd put together a lot of material, and I was frustrated by not having a textbook to meet my needs. So when I was in sabbatical last year, I wrote it. That was my main task. And so it just came out recently. Got it up I self-published, so I could sell it at a reasonable price and update it whenever I needed to update, because we find errors. So it's available on Amazon in e-version or hard copy for anybody who's interested.
So what would the purchaser that's going to read this find in this book?
So what I've tried to do, I begin with just an overview of the ethical theories that are relevant to our field, and then go through a bunch of different topics that are emergency management relevant, and sort of see how ethical theory applies to those things in a practical way. So it's intended for a student, certainly. There's lots of exercises and stuff. But also I wrote it in such a way so I think a practitioner could benefit from it as well. So in there's like ethical decision-making. How do you go about making a decision in an ethical way? What is the precautionary principle? How is it relevant to what we do? If you're doing a risk assessment, is ethics relevant? I did one survey of, God knows how many risk assessments, all the US states, the US provinces, and about, I think it was 8 or 10 different national risk assessments at the country level. And essentially ethics is absent. It is just absent as a consideration in risk assessment. And yet it's fundamental to a risk assessment. And just to illustrate that, suppose you are coming up with a metric, some metric to say, I want to measure risk. And because many risk assessments try and do this in a quantitative way, come up with an equation. What metrics should you use? Well, how do you balance off life versus wealth? That's a value judgment. And even if you're using wealth, one way of looking at it is saying, okay, this disaster created a total economic impact of so many dollars. So that is the gross amount. But suppose you do it on a percentage basis. So, and you normalize it, you can get a very different answer. To illustrate that, which is the worst disaster? The loss of $1 million to a billionaire, or the loss of $1,000 to somebody who has $1,500? If you look at the gross amount, the billionaire is going to be top of the list and the other guys don't even show up. But if you do it on a percentage basis, you flip that around. And then the people who have lost a higher percentage but don't have much, they go to the top of the list. So that one fundamental choice in terms of what metric you choose to measure risk will determine the outcomes. And in fact, feeds in an important way back into the social ramps that exist in society and how risk is constructed and so forth.
I think it's a great resource. I'm using it myself, I encourage those to go out and look for it. It's the Ethical Emergency Manager. You can find it on Amazon. And you mentioned one other place you could find it.
No, just Amazon.
Oh, just Amazon. So go to Amazon and you can purchase the book. It'd be worth the money. It's a very fair price and it's got a lot of great resources in there. So let's transition. Are you going to IAM, the virtual IAM this year?
I haven't decided yet.
No, I'm going, and I'm encouraging those that have never been to go. It's first, the cost has been reduced because of it's virtual, and there's going to be a lot of great resources. It's a way to introduce yourself to IAM, or International Association of Emergency Managers. So I think, especially if you're a student, and in years coming, if we get to, I say when we get to go back to in person, they have a whole section. The first few days is dedicated to higher education, developing your skills and how to apply it not only to education, but also to applying emergency management in the educational arena, like an institution of higher education. So I would definitely suggest going due to the reduced cost, but also due to the networking opportunities that it will allow you. Take a look at that. Also go on there and browse the IAM site, see what kind of resources you can utilize, and as you continue to develop your career.
Can I throw a quick plug in for something too?
Absolutely.
So in Canada, we have something called the Canadian Risk and Hazards Network that holds an annual conference. This year is going to be virtual. Canadian Risk and Hazards Network. And the primary purpose of that is to connect academics and practitioners in our field. So it's different from the IAEM, but still in many ways serving a similar purpose. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Oh no, great! I'm glad you did. The more resources we have available to us, and the more open-minded we are, and the more we look outside the box. I mean, just because we're in the United States, myself, doesn't mean that I can't look at what others are doing in Canada or other parts of the country. There was a conference that I really wanted to go to. They only have it every 2 years in Israel. And it was based on emergency preparedness and disaster management. And I'm hoping to get to go the next time they bring it around, which was great. It's thinking outside the box. So you're in Canada, you look at IAM, which is international, but ultimately that would be a great resource for people to look at and get ideas or see how others are doing things that could potentially aid them in the way they do things. And I noticed that in the York University advertising, you mentioned different networking associations to be a part of, conferences that you could go to by being a student. So and then that's always great to develop those, to push that to our students to say, listen, these are things that are available to you to develop you and to develop how you do it, and meet others that do the same thing. Conferences are one of the best ways to do that, in addition to taking courses, professional development courses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So as we sum up, I just want to thank you very much, David, for your time. I know one of the most valuable things a person can give is their time. And so I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the work you do in the industry. You're in personal terms, you're someone I'm looking to as guidance and direction from someone who's done it. Having work going through my dissertation, which is going to start very soon in ethics and decision making, you're definitely going to be a resource to me, and I appreciate all the work you do. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So as we end today, I just want to encourage you to go out and look at these different opportunities that you potentially have in coursework, in professional development classes, conferences. Also, just keep an open mind in the way we do things, in the way we move not only the profession, but how we teach those who are going to be going into the profession. This is Dan Scott. Don't forget to tune in on Thursday to EM Weekly with myself and Todd DeVoe, who is the reason why I am here today, and I have a lot of gratitude for that. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.